The city of Paris is nearly 2,000 years old. 2,000 years of death, plagues, and invasion have left the city overcrowded with both life and death. It is a city that lives in history. There are monuments all over the city that tell the story of Paris's history. Some are harder to find than others. For centuries, people have been fascinated with the idea of death and the afterlife. The city of Paris has a unique way of living around both death as well as history. It is a place where history can be seen on every corner. There are monuments and memorials located around the city to remember French history by memorializing those who have died. Some of these memorials are easy to find, such as Père Lachaise, the Holocaust Memorial, and the Pantheon. Other memorials are hidden, like inconspicuous plaques or memorials located throughout the city. One of the most famous hidden memorials is the Catacombs of Paris, buried deep under the streets of Paris where centuries of human remains reside. Parisian memorials are used to remember French heroes as well as family members and victims of great tragedies. If memorials and tombs are used to remember those who have been lost, then the question is how an estimated 6 million human remains could be thrown nameless into a place such as the Catacombs. In the 12th and 13th century, as a way to make money, the Christian church decided to start practicing burial rituals. People were trying to understand what happens to their souls after death, and the church used this confusion to create burial ceremonies as revenue for the church. It became the church's job to bury the bodies after these ceremonies. Burial in church cemeteries became the most common practice among Parisian Christians until the 18th century. After years of plagues and death, the cemeteries were becoming extremely overcrowded. It was common for cemeteries to be anonymous. After a funeral service, the bodies were normally left by the family to be disposed of by the church. The amount of caretaking after a death was decided by how much a family could pay, and the poor rarely even had funeral services. By the 18th century, Les Innocents Church Cemetery became one of the largest and most popular burial grounds. It was located right in the heart of Paris, around many marketplaces and homes. Bodies eventually had to be layered on top of each other. They even lined the walls of the surrounding courtyard. The smell from the rotting bodies was so bad, it was said that one could catch diseases by walking by it. Sanitation became a huge issue. After numerous complaints, the Council of the State decided on November 9, 1785, to prohibit further use of the Cemetery of the Innocents and to remove all of its contents. During this same period, the city was also dealing with a series of cave-ins starting in 1774. The limestone quarries under Paris were beginning to collapse and needed reinforcement. Several columns and walls were built to help, but more needed to be done. To fix both of these problems, the Parisian government, under the rule of King Louis XV and his successor Louis XVI, they decided to close the city cemeteries and transport the overcrowded remains to the quarries as a way to reinforce the walls. At the same time, they would move the cemeteries outside of the city. At first, this act was not accepted by all. The church even tried to fight the idea of moving the remains. It wasn't until one of the walls collapsed in Les Innocents Church due to rain, exposing rotting corpses, that it was apparent that something needed to be done. The church cemetery officially closed in 1780. According to historian Philippe Aries, families of those who were buried accepted the destruction of the cemetery of their fathers with total indifference. Les Innocents Church was one of the most troubled of the city cemeteries, since it was located in such a populated area. Moving the bodies of Les Innocents took time, since moving the remains only took place at night, in respect of the families of the deceased. It took 2.5 years, from 1785 to 1787, to remove all of the remains. Aries wrote, "They dug up graves that were 10 feet deep and opened about 50 vaults." Throughout Paris, cemeteries were being exhumed, and the entire process took 12 years until all remains were placed in the quarries. With the closing of church cemeteries, new burial grounds needed to be opened outside of the city, the most notable being Père Lachaise in Montmartre. Père Lachaise is known for being the biggest cemetery in Paris. It opened in 1804 and is now the resting place of over 1 million people. There is even a waiting list to be buried there, along with a checklist of items that make you eligible. Headstones there can consist of a simple headstone or a small church the size of a telephone booth, where family members can come and pray. There are memorials all throughout Paris. The catacombs stand out because of its unique history. Honestly, there was not one sure reason why everyone was all right with the removal of the bodies. Perhaps they were sick of the smell, or families had simply forgot about their family members buried there. Perhaps families were satisfied that they still had somewhere to visit their loved ones, as the original cemeteries were also anonymous. Despite its grisly history, the catacombs attract visitors year-round. It opened as an attraction in 1874. People have been fascinated with the purpose and history of the catacombs. Underneath the city of Paris, you can stand face to face with death. At first, it is a dank, dark, extremely unsettling feeling. But after the initial shock, the catacombs give a humbling reminder that we will all one day be nothing but bones. Not everyone can be great heroes of history. Not everyone can have a monument built for them. But as long as you leave a lasting impression on the people you leave behind, you will never be forgotten. The catacombs leave a lasting impression. Although many of the inhabitants of the Paris catacombs are anonymous, as long as it remains open, they will not completely be forgotten.